It was more than a fight. It was the feud that divided fans, countries, and cultures. The night when Khabib Nurmagomedov and Conor McGregor changed MMA forever. In today's video, we're breaking down the most heated rivalry in UFC history. How did Conor McGregor's rise to superstardom collide with Khabib's quiet dominance? What really happened during the infamous bus attack in Brooklyn? And how did one fight, UFC 229, spiral into chaos, leaving a permanent mark on the UFC? This is the full story of the feud that redefined modern MMA. And here's the twist. This isn't just about one night in Las Vegas. It's about the years of buildup, the cultural clash, the unforgettable fight, and the fallout that still echoes through the sport. So let's rewind. Because to understand UFC 229, we need to understand the men who made it happen. Conor McGregor, the meteoric rise. Conor McGregor didn't just enter the UFC, he exploded onto the scene. In 2013, a 25-year-old fighter from Dublin, Ireland, stepped into the octagon for the first time. He had charisma, swagger, and a left hand that could knock anyone out. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a showman. In just 3 years, Conor became the UFC's first ever two-division champion, holding both the featherweight and lightweight belts at the same time. What made Conor special wasn't just his fighting style, it was his personality. He was brash, witty, and ruthless with trash talk. He could sell a fight like no one else before him. His famous line to Jose Aldo before UFC 194, "When I hit, you fall." And sure enough, 13 seconds into the fight, Aldo was unconscious. Conor had turned himself into a global superstar. Pay-per-view numbers skyrocketed. The UFC had found its biggest star. But in the shadows, another man was climbing the ranks. Khabib Nurmagomedov, the silent assassin. Far from the bright lights of Dublin, in the mountains of Dagestan, a different kind of fighter was being molded. Khabib Nurmagomedov grew up wrestling in barns, training in harsh conditions, and building an unbreakable will. Famously, videos show him wrestling bears as a child. Not as a stunt, but as part of his upbringing. By the time he entered the UFC in 2012, Khabib already had a perfect record, and he kept it that way. His style was simple but terrifying, relentless wrestling, smothering top control, and ground and pound that broke his opponent's spirits. Fighters described it as drowning on dry land. Once Khabib got a hold of you, there was no escape. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, he wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing dominance. And as his win streak grew, one question became inevitable. What happens when the unstoppable wrestler meets the unstoppable striker? The first sparks of rivalry. The lightweight division was heating up. Khabib kept winning. Conor became champion. The collision course was set. But things escalated in 2018 when Conor took time off from MMA to box Floyd Mayweather. While Conor was chasing the richest fight in history, Khabib was grinding his way to the lightweight title. At UFC 223, Khabib was scheduled to fight Tony Ferguson. But when Ferguson pulled out, Al Iaquinta stepped in, and Khabib dominated him to win the lightweight belt. Now Khabib was champion, but Conor still held the lineal claim to the title. And the UFC had a problem. Only one man could be the undisputed king. The bus attack. Brooklyn, 2018. The rivalry took a dark turn in April 2018. During fight week for UFC 223, Khabib confronted Conor's teammate Artem Lobov in a New York hotel. The exchange was heated. Word got back to Conor. In response, McGregor and his crew flew across the Atlantic, storming the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Cameras caught everything. Conor hurled a dolly, a steel cart, through the window of a bus carrying fighters. Glass shattered. Fighters were injured, including Michael Chiesa and Ray Borg. The UFC was forced to pull them from the card. Khabib was inside that bus. He wasn't hurt, but he got the message. This wasn't just hype. This was personal. The lines between sport and street had been crossed. The press conferences. Trash talk crosses the line. In the lead-up to UFC 229, the press conferences were just as wild as the fight itself. Conor unleashed a verbal assault like no one had seen before. He mocked Khabib's religion, his father, his country, even offering whiskey to a devout Muslim on stage. Khabib stayed calm, but you could see it in his eyes. This wasn't just promotion. This was hatred. The UFC capitalized. The fight was billed as the biggest in history. Pay-per-view sales shattered records, pulling in over 2.4 million buys, still the highest in UFC history. The world wasn't just watching a fight. They were watching a clash of cultures, values, and egos. The fight, UFC 229, October 6th, 2018. The T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas was electric. Over 20,000 fans packed the seats. Millions more tuned in worldwide. When the cage door shut, the tension was unbearable. Round 1. Khabib wasted no time. He shot for a takedown, dragged Conor to the mat, and smothered him for most of the round. Conor defended well, but was already breathing heavy. Round 2. The shocker. Khabib stood with Conor and landed a huge right hand that dropped him. The grappler had outstruck the striker. The crowd erupted. Khabib followed it up with ground and pound that nearly finished the fight. Round 3. Conor had his best round here, stuffing takedowns and landing some shots. But the damage was done. He was behind on the scorecards and fading fast. Round 4. The end. Khabib dragged Conor down again, worked to his back, and cranked on a neck crank. Conor tapped. The feud had its answer. Khabib was still undefeated. The Dagestani wrestler had conquered the UFC's biggest star. But the night wasn't over. The brawl after the bell. As soon as Conor tapped, Khabib stood up and did something no one expected. He hurled his mouthpiece at Conor's corner, then leaped over the cage, diving straight at Dylan Dennis, one of Conor's teammates. A brawl erupted outside the cage. At the same time, members of Khabib's team stormed into the octagon and attacked Conor. Punches were thrown. The crowd went wild. Security rushed in. It was chaos. The biggest fight in UFC history had descended into an all-out riot. Dana White, the UFC president, refused to give Khabib his belt in the cage, fearing the crowd would riot. Khabib left the arena under police escort. The Nevada State Athletic Commission handed down suspensions and fines. Khabib was suspended for 9 months and fined $500,000. Conor got a 6-month suspension and a $50,000 fine. But the damage and the impact went far beyond money. Khabib became a global superstar overnight. In Russia and across the Muslim world, he was hailed as a hero. His discipline, his dominance, and his refusal to play Conor's games made him a symbol. Conor, meanwhile, saw his aura of invincibility shatter. He remained a star, but fans began questioning if he'd ever be the same. The UFC itself leaned even harder into spectacle. Trash talk, rivalries, and personal feuds became the fuel for promotion. But UFC 229 also raised a question. Had the UFC gone too far in encouraging hatred to sell fights? Looking back, UFC 229 wasn't just another title fight. It was a turning point. It showed how far the UFC had grown, pulling in record-breaking numbers. It proved rivalries sell, but at a dangerous cost. And it forever linked two fighters whose names will always be mentioned together. For Khabib, the story ended perfectly. He retired undefeated at 29-0, walking away as one of the greatest fighters of all time. For Conor, the story is still being written, but UFC 229 marked the moment when his invincibility was truly broken. And for MMA, the feud showed the world that this sport isn't just about fighting, it's about stories, emotions, and rivalries that transcend the cage. Khabib versus McGregor wasn't just a feud. It was a cultural clash. It was East versus West, humility versus bravado, wrestling versus striking. It redefined MMA. It brought millions of new fans to the sport. It made headlines far beyond sports media. And it reminded everyone that while MMA is about fighting, it's also about humanity. The good, the bad, and the ugly. The feud between Khabib and McGregor changed MMA forever. It wasn't just about who won that night in Las Vegas. It was about everything that led to it, and everything that came after. It gave us chaos. It gave us history. And it gave us the reminder that sometimes the fight doesn't end when the bell rings. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think the feud between Khabib and McGregor was good for MMA? Or did it cross the line? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more deep dives into the rivalries that shaped the fight game.